5 cents might not seem like much, but when it's 5 cents for every cow every day, then it really adds up. New AminoSure XM precision-release methionine provides the optimal combination of cost, feed stability, rumen stability, and intestinal release to deliver the best cost per unit of available methionine on the market today. Learn how at balchemanh.com/findyourx.
Welcome to the 2021 Florida Ruminant Nutrition Virtual Symposia. In this group of presentations sponsored by Balchem, we're focusing on a practical guide to reaching net zero carbon emissions. These recorded presentations will serve as the background for our live discussion on Thursday, May 13th, 2021. This presentation is focused on how feed production impacts global emissions. Our presenter, Jim Wallace, holds the position of Senior Vice President, Environmental Research at DMI. He is responsible for developing strategy for the Environmental Science and Research Program to position U.S. dairy in a global food system. He also leads the foundational work for environmental research and measurement to inform decisions, update models, and advance outcomes for dairy industry's net zero initiative. Prior to joining DMI, Jim was the Senior Vice President of Engineering and Business Development for Nutrient, where he was responsible for developing and leading new technology and project initiatives, supporting environmental market-based development efforts, and led the technical phase of the dairy industry's net zero initiative. The interface of water quality and renewable energy with business and technology development have been a common thread throughout Jim's 28-year career. Jim, please take it away.
Thank you for that introduction, Scott, and good afternoon to everybody. As Scott said, I am Jim Wallace, Senior Vice President of Environmental Research at DMI, and I'm going to share a high-level summary of U.S. Dairy's 2050 goals and net zero initiative, and then offer background about one of the dairy industry's key research programs focused on feed production. So I'm going to start with the why. It really starts with consumers. Stats from Hartman Group and others shown on this slide illustrate that consumers have an expectation that brands that they choose, where they put their dollars, is more and more into products they know were sustainably produced. 70% of consumers would like to see companies' sustainable practices be more visible to the public. 80% of consumers said that it's very or extremely important that consumers implement programs to help the environment. Bottom line, consumers are pushing for more sustainable products. So what does that say to us? We know that dairy has a great story and a history of sustainability, and we can point to 2 reports just within the past 2 years, one from FAO and one from the Journal of Animal Science, that indicates a GHG reduction for US and or North American dairy over the last 10 years. We know this is what consumers want and what they expect. Part of what we are going to accomplish with this initiative is to provide the documentation and proof and tell the story more completely, accurately, and comprehensively for US dairy. More specifically about the audiences, this slide speaks to millennials, Gen Z, and Gen Alpha, the next generation. You can see how their purchase power is based on how it aligns with their values. Instead of focusing away from the environment, it's only grown and strengthened. And we're going to see more and more of this. From a global standpoint, this is moving up the supply chain to those influenced by consumer trends. Investor groups like BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street, and others are making specific requirements for their investment. They want to see a certain percent of their investment go toward climate and or sustainability efforts. We have global dairy customers like Nestle, Starbucks, Coca-Cola, and the like, who are prioritizing sustainability in their supply chains, and other dairy companies as well. So when they set those expectations, they're answering consumer demands, and this is coming back to us and our farms to deliver on. And in addition, we have countries around the world who are making legal commitments to be carbon neutral. Certainly that is not as likely to happen here in the US, but it is a significant influence and one we need to be aware of if US dairy wants to have a role in the global marketplace. So the consumer piece is table stakes and part of the why, but the environmental solutions have to come with an economic condition to make possible that as a continuum. That's how we built this initiative, meeting consumers where they are, answering for where dairy is and where dairy is going, and making sure it's profitable. So dairy is an environmental solution. This is our aspirational vision. In April of 2020, the Innovation Center for U.S. Dairy's Board of Directors adopted the Dairy Industry Environmental Stewardship Goals to become carbon neutral or better, optimize water use while maximizing recycling, and improving water quality by optimizing utilization of manure and nutrients. By way of brief background, the Innovation Center, or IC, serves to bring the dairy community together, farmers, processors, and others in the dairy supply chain in a united way, pre-competitively, looking at consumer expectations and social responsibility issues, including the environment. Our collective goals include from field to farm to processor. Individual work and results will not be implemented or reported by every farm or company, but in aggregate as an industry. So there are two companion strategies that will drive for coordinated, collaborative, and collective action forward toward our shared goals. The first, and it's the box on the right, is a processor-led effort with work streams that focus on waste, water, packaging, and GHG emissions. And then the box on the left, called the Net Zero Initiative, will focus at the field and farm level across all farms. And this is where we're really focusing our discussion today. And just as some additional background, the IC went through a year-long process with the input of more than 100 stakeholders to set the vision and goals, which are aspirational but not unrealistic. By better understanding dairy production, we realize we have unique abilities and that there are tremendous opportunities to both reduce and mitigate environmental impacts. The goals are collective, 29 years out, and were prioritized through a materiality assessment, a process that assesses environmental topics by importance to stakeholders and the ability of dairy to impact or have influence on those environmental topics. The top rated areas for dairy were 1, greenhouse gas emissions, 2, water quality, and 3, water use. And I want to reiterate that collective means not one farm is going to achieve these, but it's a measurement and reporting collectively across all farms starting in 2025 with progress reported every 5 years. The bottom of the slide is showing the strategies for how we'll get there, field and farm, and then processor level. Net zero is around 4 key areas on the farm. It emphasizes collaboration with the goal of knocking down barriers and doing so in an economically viable fashion. This slide we talk about the NZI core tracks, and this offers some insight into how the NZI program was structured. There are 3 key pillars or core tracks, and I'm going to offer a little bit of background into each one of those programs, starting with groundwork. As a working definition, groundwork represents foundational science needed to support the economic, environmental, and measurement elements of the initiative. Importantly, it feeds into the other 2 pillars. Groundwork focuses on the 4 on-farm environmental prints on a dairy: enteric, or gas emitted by cow burps, manure, on-farm energy, and feed production. In aggregate, those 4 environmental prints add up to the total carbon footprint of a dairy. And within each of those prints, we are building out programs to support the other 2 pillars, Dairy Scale for Good and collective impact. Moving to the right to Dairy Scale for Good. This is a really unique and fascinating program within NZI. This pillar is focused on partnerships with 3 to 5 farms that will prove the economic viability of a full suite of practices and technologies. It's putting together in real time, all in one place, those technologies and practices to take a dairy all the way to net zero carbon and beyond, with significant improvements in water quality and quantity. It will establish market-based approaches for reaching net zero emissions and increasing farmer livelihood. And a bit later in this meeting segment, you will hear from Caleb Harper, who leads the Dairy Scale for Good program, and he will highlight some of the key elements of this program. And finally, moving to the final core track, collective impact. As we have talked to different audiences and farmers about this work, we know it's important to emphasize that the goals are collective, that not all farms will do everything, but every farm can do something. NZI has benefits and outcomes for farms of all sizes. What happens on the small number of pilot farms under Dairy Scale for Good, for example, will have benefits for the industry as a whole. What we learned there and the markets developed and data gathered will have applicability to the entire industry, maybe not immediately, but definitely over time. Collective impact provides the infrastructure through which we can make sure that information gets disseminated and into the hands of advisors, farmers, and on-farm organizations such that all size farms have access to that information. Collective impact is about scaling up of the application and adoption of practices. Reaching that scale requires making sure that we get information with access and support to all corners of this industry. For collective impact to be successful, we need a lot of partnerships and engagement across the industry and beyond. These three tracks represent a comprehensive and thoughtful plan to supporting farms of all sizes and doing what is right for their farms. The work under these pillars will be simultaneous and collaborative, sharing learning to feed and improve efforts, making the initiative stronger, and leading to more valuable outcomes. Today, research is being initiated, partners are being selected, economic models are being designed, and the community of practice is being established. So I want to offer a little bit more granularity to the way that we are thinking about the on-farm environmental footprint. And this is consistent with what I just talked through as it relates to groundwork and the 4 key environmental prints of the dairy farm. So this is just a simple schematic. It's meant to illustrate those 4 basic environmental prints: feed production, enteric methane, energy, and manure, and to connect those prints with some of the strategies for driving the dairy to net zero. The scope covers all size dairies in all regions. Some strategies can be implemented today, and others are in various stages of development within the groundwork pillar. Starting at the top left with feed production, these are some of the strategies that we're really working to build out, and I'm going to offer a lot more detail about this feed production piece a little bit later in this presentation. But within feed production, we're thinking about strategies like minimal disturbance tillage, like cover cropping, like new manure-based products or renewable fertilizers, like innovative crop rotations, precision agriculture, and so on. Continuing on to the right with cow care and efficiency, this is about addressing impacts of enteric methane or gas emissions from cows. There are a number of strategies that we're exploring, like feed additives. Dr. Juan Tricarico, who is leading the enteric methane mitigation space on behalf of the NZI effort, will summarize the scientific findings available on feed additives in a separate presentation within this meeting. Enteric methane mitigation is a broad topic, and although feed additives are only one of the approaches to mitigate methane, they are currently getting a lot of attention in the scientific industry and media circles. In addition to feed additives, we're also thinking about things like feed reformulation, genetics, and even technology. And when I say technology, I'm really thinking about technologies that move us closer to single cow management. Moving on to the right, the on-farm energy piece. Here we're thinking about simple things that many dairy farmers are already doing for energy efficiency, things like LED lighting, variable frequency drives, high efficiency refrigeration systems. We're also contemplating new opportunities in various regions associated with things like wind power and solar. And of course, I don't think we can talk about on-farm energy without talking about anaerobic digestion, though I think it's fair to say most people think about anaerobic digestion in the production of either biogas for electricity or biogas for renewable natural gas as a large farm technology. And I agree. Today, it really is more of a large farm technology. As we move forward with this NZI initiative, there's little doubt that through scaling of technology, we will see the size of farm that benefits from the adoption of anaerobic digestion certainly reduced. And then finally, moving to the final print, manure management. This could be as straightforward as comprehensive nutrient management plans, putting together things like nutrient recovery for fiber separation, all the way to the other end of the spectrum with advanced nutrient recovery technology that seeks to push nutrients into dry forms that are transportable and storable, truly shifting the manure management paradigm from a lagoon-based system to one where we place nutrients exactly where and when they're needed to improve the overall environmental and economic outcome of the dairy. Since NZI's inception, we have recognized that we are reserving the farmer's right to revenue generated on farm that hasn't previously been perceived or viewed as a value or source of revenue. We spent time talking about what NZI is, and it's also important to talk about what NZI is not. Again, I want to emphasize that this is not about every farm reaching net zero. It is a collective effort. It's not a mandate. It's a voluntary pathway, a proactive effort to advance and prepare dairy for the future. It's not immediate. The goals are 29 years out, but we're focused on action today to build our progress over time. And with that, I'd like to transition into an overview of one of the key NZI research initiatives focused on feed production. So I want to share a little bit of background on our thinking about feed production. The dairy industry was the first in the animal egg space to conduct a life cycle assessment, or LCA. However, the weakest link in that analysis was feed production. This is a busy slide, and it's really intended for one purpose: to illustrate that there was a process used in that dairy LCA, but also to illustrate that it was quite general in terms of how the estimates were put together. Though I contend the science was solid, it was also quite general, as I just mentioned, and it also preceded much of the thinking around the use of advanced soil health management practices and new manure-based products. As a result, there are great opportunities for us to more accurately quantify our feed production footprint. As a little bit of background, when the NZI work was started about 2.5 years ago, one of the first steps was to understand the critical research and knowledge gaps. And there are many. However, one of the first that we chose to focus on is feed production. Though feed production is not the most significant GHG contributor for the dairy enterprise, it does offer perhaps some of the most unique opportunities as it relates to soil carbon sequestration potential and water quality as future revenue sources for the dairy. Based on this position, the dairy industry developed a feed production program and partnered with the Foundation for Food and Ag Research. This program, called Nzi Dairy Feed, Soil and Water Outcomes, is focused on quantifying and advancing the science around dairy feed production. So again, it's titled NZI Dairy Feed, Soil and Water Outcomes. It is a partnership with Foundation for Food and Ag Research, as well as other dairy industry stakeholders. The program is 6 years, including 5 growing seasons. FFAR is contributing $10 million, and an additional $13.2 million is being contributed by others in the dairy supply chain. At a high level, this program will assess the impact of minimal disturbance tillage, cover cropping, innovative crop rotations, and new manure-based products on soil carbon sequestration, agronomic and environmental outcomes, and soil health. Background-wise, and to give a sense of the breadth and scope, we divided the country into 4 regions: the Northeast, Lake States, Mountain Region, and California. Within each of those 4 regions, we're partnering with 8 farms, 5 operating dairies, 2 university research dairies, and 1 ARS research farm, 8 key research partners, including Cornell University, University of Vermont, University of Wisconsin-Madison, University of Wisconsin-Platteville, Texas A&M, UC Davis, and ARS Kimberly, Idaho, as well as the Soil Health Institute, who is our key partner across all regions. And in each region, there is a combination of large plot and field scale work with both water quality and quantity elements in each region. On this next slide, we capture the three primary tasks that we are seeking